Art has always been an expression of beauty, culture, and meaning. But in an era where a banana duct taped to a wall has become almost mainstream, it feels like the boundaries of creativity are becoming harder to define. So are we in a period of inclusion and expression, or is art losing its cultural depth? I'm Nadir Nahdi, and this is the Doha Debates podcast.
You can't say that you're a painter and then pay someone else to do your paintings. It's like using your money to steal credit for someone else's talent.
This very postmodern guy who came to me and he was like, how dare you carve that stone?
You decide, I don't want it to be engaged in social, political issues because you have the privilege to decide that.
Who are you to say that this is art and what is not art?
Our debate today, is it time to reconsider contemporary art? Now, it gives me so much pleasure to welcome our guest today. I'm going to start with Fen de Villiers, who is a modernist sculptor who uses traditional materials like bronze and stone. We have Samar Younes, an artist and futurist who works with generative AI. Molly Crabapple is a writer and illustrator whose work has been featured in books and animated short films. And finally, Wafaa Bilal is a mixed media artist who frequently experiments with new technologies. He's also an arts professor at NYU. Thank you so much for being here. Now, I'm going to get straight into it because we've got so much to cover. And we'll start with you, Fen.
Yeah.
So my question to you ultimately is it time to reconsider contemporary art today? And if so, why? And what are the problems we're facing?
I think it's time to definitely reconsider where we are in terms of contemporary art. If you see what's happened over the last, say, 50, 60 years, we've essentially watched a rather silent revolution happen on the institutional level. Broad majority of art institutions across the West have been essentially captured by what I would say, unfortunately, is what you could call the new Philistines in many respects, who are politically motivated and very anti sort of making of sculpture or actually involved in the process of generally making an artifact, right, should we say, and more about playing a role of being didactic, teaching the broad public solely on political issues or, let's say, more new left cultural issues. And what I've generally watched is that, a lover of sculpture specifically, is that when I would attend the majority of these major institutions across the West, I would walk in and I would say, well, where's the sculpture, right? And then at the same time, you'd also have like a curator saying, well, those lines are blurred now because sculpture can be a dance, or sculpture can be a poem, or sculpture can be anything that the artist says it is, right? And so things have become extremely muddy. Whereas I sort of come back to the basic principles of you're set before a block of stone. It's 5 tons. How are you going to get involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I carve the stone with a set of chisels or heavy pneumatic tools, and it's a body process with the material. And in that process is that magical moment of you're finding a composition, you're finding an aesthetic, you're trying to express something on an aesthetic level, and it's subtle and it's refined, and you're trying to bring down quite important issues, should we say, in an aesthetic language, but you're not standing there and saying, please read this large story on the wall before you enter the space to understand what I've done. That's really not what I'm doing. I'm very much tired of that. Many people are tired of that. I think we're starting to see, especially as funding is getting cut gradually, sort of the ending of that system. Thank goodness.
Fascinating. Thank you for laying the foundations in that. From what I understood is that art basically is losing its importance for the significance of materiality.
Yes.
And it's becoming more about ideals and projections. And that's a great place to start. And I kind of want to take that to you, Wafaa, because you're someone who reinterprets the mediums of art. And how do you respond to someone saying that art is losing its significance of materiality and becoming so much more ephemeral or interpretive?
I have the opposite idea of that. Because art these days become more relevant than ever. And here is why. In the in the past, art used to be made for the art of the beholder. And the shift come from the futurist when they rejected the status quo and start frustrating the public and the power structure by embedding the idea of art in the concept itself and denying the access to that idea and asking the viewer to decode what they encoded, thus shifting the role of the artist from the craft maker into a trigger of a platform, making the artist more relevant than other and giving the artist a significant role in the society to engage the public in the social and political issues that is more relevant than others. In the past, the artist was a privilege and was tied to the power structure who funded the artist. Today, artists rejecting the power, rejecting the status quo, rejecting the institution, and become relevant to say, I am part of the society. I am tired of being a follow to somebody who could just fund in me. And now I am leading a revolution.
So it's obvious here we have these fascinating polarities between materiality and relevancy. Molly, do you have an opinion about this? Is this something we haven't seen or we're missing?
I think that the devaluation of the craft of working with your hands as an artist, is something that goes hand in hand with the society-wide devaluation of all labor. If one says that it's enough to have an idea and you can just palm off the creation of the work to other people or to some sort of corporate generator bot, what one's saying is that the labor of one's hand is valueless. I think I side with Fen here. As an artist, I work with my hands. I've been so privileged to travel around the world documenting protests, war zones, nightclubs, and I do it with my own aching hands. And to me, that's the essence of art. And if you don't do work yourself, then what are you? At best, you're an art director or a CEO.
Fascinating. Samar, how about you? How do you feel about it?
I have a lot to add, great perspectives, but I want to talk about this through the context of what I call quantum craft. As somebody who used to work with my hands a lot, trained architect, scenographer, explored so many materials, and understand the, reaction to how you explore material, but understanding inherently that material could be ephemeral, digital, or physical. It's understanding how you sort of manipulate it and the quantity and qualities of it in terms of how it reacts to you and how you hack it, how you mutate it. I talk a lot about artists are insurgent. They are mutators. And when I talk about quantum craft, it's about understanding inherently how you can work with a variety of different intelligence. Artisanal is one of them, which is very important, which is embodied, is understanding how you work with your hands. But let's not fool ourselves in stating that craft is being devalued now. It was devalued through the colonial framework of what made contemporary art. Craftsmen, indigenous craftsmen, have had their work stolen by contemporary art. Women craftsmen, some of the most incredible, pieces of contemporary art for me are the G-band quilts that are not considered art, but to me they're art. A beautifully set, table that sort of has been done with a specificity is also a form of art. So craft has been devalued, but not for the same reason. It's now conveniently seen as devalued by the egocentric world of art that sees themselves now as the Immaculate Conception or creators of craft. But to me, we have devalued craft and the idea of craftsmen to begin with as ingenuity and as part of a knowledge system that's in our blood that is inherited from our grandma, whether it's tatriz, whether it is, the making. The idea of making is not a privilege only for artists. It is a system of knowledge that has been, for us always. So when I talk about quantum craft, is navigating through multiple intelligence system, is understanding sort of the artisan is understanding the cultural relevancy that Wafa brought up, and is also understanding that the ancestral sort of legacy of what that means operating across different times and time period. But it's also understanding how do you operate through new systems like technology or like artificial intelligence as well.
Perfect. I think you've teed me up perfectly to understand this better. So on this table, I'm the layman, obviously. And I think what helps me is understanding what you're saying through practical human experiences. And Wafa, this is why I want your work to help me out. I've become familiar with your domestic tension project, and maybe you could tell me a bit more about that, and that will lay the foundation of what this polar differences between materiality and relevance, how they play out in the artistic space. So domestic tensions, what was happening there?
Great question. But before I get into domestic tension, it's worth mentioning the idea of how art function in society and what led to conceive domestic tension and how it functioned. When I left Iraq in 1991 after the invasion of Kuwait and the liberation, I spent 2 years in a refugee camp in Saudi Arabia, and I arrived to New Mexico, and my artwork was very much antagonistic in its nature. Why? Because I was very much experiencing the apocalyptic word of my life collapsed in the last 2 years prior to that. And I was blaming the very people who hosted me and given me a second life as they are the cause of what happened to me and what happened to my family. That continued until I moved to Chicago, and then the 2003 invasion of Iraq again by United States. 1 year later, the death of my brother Haji took place, and he was killed by a drone attack, by American drone attack. Then I was contemplating how I am as an artist could share the tragedy and the loss of a human being in a comfort zone where I lived, while his death took place in the conflict zone of Iraq, and thinking of the antagonistic work I did in New Mexico doesn't work anymore because I was alienating people. And here comes the idea of interactivity, and the role of the artist shifted from craft into a trigger of a platform to bring people in to participate in the artwork. So it took me 3 years to conceive that project, thinking about it. And the inspiration come 2007. I was watching the news of an American soldier in Colorado, and she was a drone pilot sitting in a base in Colorado, directing the drone dropping bombs on Iraq, and no physical or psychological connection to the target in Iraq. And that was the trigger. And I thought, this is what the project is about. It's about the disconnect between the comfort zone and the conflict zone of Iraq. And that was by design. So then what I did, I contacted the gallery and I said, this is the project. I am going to move my living space in Humboldt Park in Chicago into the West Loop, and I going to create a robot-like, which is exactly like a drone, and give the control to the entire world to shoot an Iraqi. And in fact, the project at the beginning was called Shoot an Iraqi until the gallery objected to the name, and we call it domestic tension because it became about the tension within the culture. And to my surprise and everybody's surprise, it went viral in 2007. I was shot at 65,000 times within 1 month and 80 million hits on the website. But the most important thing, I think, to this day is the chat room we opened on the website. 3,000 pages of people talking each other, informing how unjust the war is, and that connected for the first time the physical platform of a gallery to a digital platform of the internet, allowing people to witness what happened and then what art could do by soliciting and arriving to the empathetic response, which art could be great at delivering.
Well, I mean, look, I think what's being expressed here, and I find it an interesting idea, you've created this, if I understand, this machine as the piece of work, which then goes on to create a large dialogue around the issue. Okay, I mean, I don't have a massive issue with that. It's a temporary piece of work that's very much active upon the moment and reactive upon the moment of what's going on. A tragic situation, undeniably. The issue is that this type of artwork is what you see endlessly pushed through the institutions now. Yeah. And with very little wiggle room for too much else, right? And so what you end up having is it's like, oh, I've made this work and it's about a tragic issue. I agree, sure. I'm not going to deny that. And what's left over is this machine and this discussion, sure. And it's highlighted an issue. The problem that I have is that what ends up happening is that all of the major sort of contemporary art institutions now are running on this. Oh, this artist is reacting to this. This artist is reacting to that. This artist is making about this issue. And the problem is that I always come back to this thing of like, but where's the actual artifact? And I look back to what have the other past civilizations left us? What did the Greeks leave us? What did we get from the Western canon? What has been left over? It's works that we can look to. Maybe you like them or you don't like them, but they're there, set in stone, set in a material, and we can look back to them, we can grab them, and we can throw them forward. I think that the problem now is that 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 50 years from now, I just don't think that these artifacts, little videos, weird dance performances, strings and balloons in spaces, the biggest question will be what has been left behind.
But very quickly, like you talked about these institutions that are pushing, do you feel like they're pushing a certain agenda? And if that is, what is that?
Look, the thing that people really need to understand, and I can't go into it hugely because it would take too long, but briefly, since the 1960s, you have had a march through the institutions. And what has happened is you've seen a lot of new left radicals who have taken directorial positions in a lot of these cultural institutions. Now, you might say, depending on what side you're on, that's a good thing or a bad thing. Mm. But the thing that was amazing about this is that they were very revolutionary and they were far more energized than the sort of stuffy conservatives that were holding position. They ripped through them like a hot knife through butter. The problem is that we've reached revolution and they don't have an answer.
Like, who are you to say that this is art and what is not art? And who are you to even say that an artifact that's physical or digital is art or is not art? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you need craftsmanship no matter what the tool. I look at data as a form of craft. I need it like clay. You would think, what does that mean? Well, there is a specific way in how you work with data. There is a specific way in terms of how you weave it, how you work with it in ways that you generate things and to sort of dissolve the idea of the ego of thinking of ourselves as individual genius, which we're not.
Well, look, I mean, we can talk about the arts and crafts movement. We can talk about the Art Deco period. We can talk about a period where different sculpture and stuff was made. Is that aesthetic slop? Is that stuff that no, that made our world far more visually vital than what I find is going on today, where ultimately, I love to be able to walk around a building that there's like a piece of sculpture in front of, or some amazing ornate, works coming up the building or whatever. The thing you have to understand about postmodernism, of which, people here I think are very much subscribed to, is that it's a very much a intellectual pursuit over the aesthetic pursuit. It's always language. And then you sort of like, well, maybe, I don't know. And then you're like, but I'm standing in front of a cup and it's supposed to be talking about this. No, I'm sorry.
I agree with you. Our cities look terrible.
They do.
I live in an old school New York tenement housing that was made for poor people 100 years ago. It's more beautiful than anything built for the richest people in New York now. The thing that I think we disagree on is that the reason I believe our cities look terrible is because of capitalism, because it is much cheaper to have prefab, drywall, plastic crap. That is why our buildings, including the buildings of the richest people in New York City, look like that. It's not because of postmodernism. It's not because of leftists pulling the strings. It's because contractors and builders make so much more money, and also because workers, including sculptors like yourself, are disempowered and marginalized by using prefab materials. I mean, I think about the power of the Italian stonemasons, right, who carved all of those beautiful gargoyles and nudes all over New York City. There is no one in New York that will pay for sculptors to do that now. And it's not because they're postmodern, and it's not because they're leftists. It's because they want to make as much money, squeeze as much money as they can out of each building. And I think that you and I perhaps have a lot of aesthetic similarity, but we have a disagreement in cause. I tend to look at things politically and materially, and I think that capitalism is to blame for so much of this aesthetic degradation. And I think that extractive, mass-produced schlock capitalism that is making our buildings look so terrible in New York is what has reached its final apex with the generators.
Do you have a suggestion outside of capitalism?
I'm not an economist. I'm just an artist. That's why I'm at the table with all of you.
This is where we always end up, though.
However, what I would say is that it's never simply been an all or nothing, right? There's this sort of democratic socialism that is quite common in Europe. Not everything has to be build it as fast and cheap and hideously as possible, like it is in America.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the major sculptural works that are going across Britain and the West now, it's dreadful. It's dreadful work. Would you say that that's due to capitalism that's driving that? Just sort of like a weird twisted shape with something thrown around it. I mean, people find majoritively now people are getting so sick of this, and they're like,
"I'm sick of it."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't look to that and say, "Oh yeah, these silly pieces of sculpture that are now getting put on every single sort of street corner or major apparent sort of area of importance in across London or major cities across Europe." I wouldn't look at that and say that's capitalism, because if you look at it, these pieces of these works, it's not the cheapest thing that's going there. These works are sometimes funded with millions that go into it. The point that I'm making is actually you could actually have some really quite strong monumental work in stone or bronze, or a collective. Bring a series of sculptors together and have them make something. You could fund it. You could probably even do it cheaper than than some of the budgets these artists connected or interconnected with institutions. And again, it's because they deny the aesthetic importance. It's because they have spoken away and used language like a corrosive measure to attack aesthetic strength.
To add to that layer, what is the difference between design and art, one would say? Because I always, is asked this question. And, when I went through my cancer journey, I had a really big issue with how the hospitals are designed. Because to me, the houses need to look like temples. Because for me, I have a very high sensitivity to aesthetic environment, how it sort of touches me. And I'm not the only one, of course. So what I sort of ended up noticing and I kind of went down the rabbit hole and research around this concept of neuroaesthetics, that there is actually a neurological effect of certain aesthetic standard that you spoke about, that were coming from, ancient culture and such, but they're inherently sort of have been developed because they impact the brain wave on certain lens. So biophilic environment, certain symmetries and such.
Sorry, can you explain this better? Can you explain this clearer to me? Because obviously, this is new to me. But are you basically saying there's a universal idea of what is beautiful in the
it's not more of the idea of what is beautiful, but there is a specific impact on the brain and how it feels, more at peace, less stress, all these things directly related to certain beauty attributes that are neuroaesthetic, which our hospital, for instance, are not designed for. They're the opposite. Everything around it, the sheet, the lighting, and I was like, I need to redesign this entire place because it's gonna drive me crazy. But this is basically what we don't consider, and I think we don't consider that not because of art or artists, because ultimately it's about understanding where this is important in society and where it's not. I don't think art, it's important always to be neuroaesthetic. As a matter of fact, I think it needs to be mutated, insurgent, and actually not necessarily aesthetic at times to provoke, to sort of really disrupt the status quo. But I do feel society needs to sort of be more educated and informed, and it starts from the cultural perspective on the policy and on the political end, on the sort of urban planning end, and on education. Education plays a big role because if you're not aware, you're going to produce more slop.
It's a great moment to say we've been talking about art as if it is one thing.
Right.
Art is not. To me, art is an act of assigning a value by an artist to an object or a performative act. That means there are so many different kind of art. There is the contemplative act, which is an artist's meditative act on an aesthetic, and that is an artist choose to do that. And there is an artist choose to activate for social political reason. And somehow when we say in the society art, there is a picture of this narcissist person come to people's mind that's an artist. That immediately come to their mind as if we are alien landed on the planet, wanted to mooch on everything and take all the resources and be the privileged who always looked as if we don't do anything of value. That is a problem of the society. That is not our problem, because the society always fail to keep up with our mind. It's not our problem, but it's the society problem. While we keep pushing the envelope forward and keep thinking what art is, the society still think we are sitting somewhere, sipping on something, smoking something, and we have no idea what the rest of the society do, and they expecting us at the end producing something beautiful, have no value except appreciating aesthetic. That's not what art is. Art is multiple things, and the society have to come up with the term with it.
But does that mean it can also be beautiful without meaning then?
Absolutely.
Right? The inverse. I was almost worried to ask you guys.
It's always aesthetic is in the heart of it. Why is that? Because even with political art, to me, I always think about this. Aesthetic pleasure versus aesthetic pain. Even as artists who always have engage in a political dialogue. To me, first thing I think of it, how I filter that political issue in an aesthetic where the aesthetic bring people in, that is the content, that is the aesthetic. Once you engage people in the aesthetic, the content and the pain seep in.
This is where I really agree. This is why I absolutely love and have looked at for a long time the early modernists, from the futurists to looking at the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. Sculpture specifically that I'm interested in became about this thing of power as beauty, or brutality as a sense of beauty. And a piece of work, just so I'm clear, when I'm talking about aesthetic, I'm not talking about, everything should be treacly sweet and beautiful and lovely. In fact, I'm far more of a early modernist taker on that, is that I think indeed you can have really brash, the unique continuity of forms and space by Boccioni is an extraordinary piece of work. And it's not something that the, let's say, more idealist aesthetic thinkers, conservative thinkers would say, oh, that's like really beautiful. No, but there's a power there. There's a vitality and strength there that I look to and say,
or Andy
incredible.
Warhol, execution chair, or the accident so that's another sort of aesthetic.
But possibly. But what I'm saying is, I totally agree with you on this, is that there can be a really brutal piece of work that you look to, and it can stop you in your tracks, and you say, you know what, I'm just drawn in by this, and no, it's not treacly sweet, it's not treacly beautiful, it's just really powerful. But it's like it's made of something, it's carved in stone, or it's in bronze, or it's some sort of very deep painting.
To me, we are practicing artists, and what makes us not bound by material. And some artists are bound by material, which is a limitation. To me, the idea determines the medium. Why is that? Because we are practicing artists, and the objective of everything we conceive going to determine who are the people we are engaging. And based on that, that's the material, and the platform is determined by the artist. We are creating an encounter.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Please.
Yeah, this is stuff that I've been fighting very much for a long time. It's this idea of like the artist's ego, or I remember one time I was talking about carving stone, and there was this very postmodern guy who came to me and he was like, how dare you carve that stone? How dare you take that stone?
The stone was going to cry? Did you hurt the stone?
And he was like, how dare you do this? And I was like, sorry, what? And I just couldn't, because I have so much trouble jumping into this sort of linguistic framework. And I was just like, look, the stone is there. It's many tons, and I'm going to engage with it right now. Like, that's my thing. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not filling my head with all of this sort of, oh, maybe it's this, and it's an experience, or it's this and that. I'm engaging the piece, and you can say that's an egoic act. It's an act of love with creating this piece of work. You're dedicating to it. And the process of doing that is you make a piece of sculpture that then goes out and stands in the world. You put it out there. A block of stone captures space. It dominates space. You put it out there. And some people can come to it and it says something to them, and other people say it doesn't say anything to them. But you have loved what you have done. The sculptor, the artist, the painter have loved creating that artifact, and he puts it out there. A painter paints, a sculptor sculpts. We can't simply just use language to corrode this fact. It's like this idea of like, well, anyone's an artist now. Is everyone an engineer? Is everyone a bridge builder? Can anyone be a surgeon? No, I'm sorry, they can't. I have to push back on this idea because I've had it for years, having been around the institutions. This leads to nowhere.
I think what me and you perhaps have in common is this desire to use our art to consume all of the world and to express so many mediums. And the thing that I sometimes resent the most in the contemporary art world is the devaluation of craft, which is at the end of the day, the devaluation of labor. Art, to me, is what happens when craft meets the divine. There might be craft that isn't high art, but there is no art without craft.
Mm-hmm.
But what you guys keep saying, the devaluation of a craft, I always hire people to do the craft. So it's not like devaluation of the craft. We love people who do the craft, but it doesn't have to be us. We are the idea makers. We are engaged people in such an act. We trigger a platform. So where is the devaluation of a craft in this?
I've worked with craftsmen for 25 years. Incredible craftsmen, because I worked in the world of luxury for a while, and you have to work with incredible craftsmen who are not valued. You don't see them as the face of the brand. They're the one who are creating all this stuff behind the scene, but you don't see their name signed on, let's say, a bag.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
This is one of the
doesn't
biggest
mean they're
ethical
devalued.
failures.
Though. It depends on what context and in what it's about us rethinking our structure and how we sort of position things. Who is valued? Usually it is the artistic director of the brand, because the ideation of how the shape is through their lens. And for me, the future of an artist is more of a conductor.
What Samar is saying about the craftsmen and the teams that are involved in these projects is really, really important. And it reminds me of something that I think is one of the worst practices of the fine art world, though not a problem in the world that Samar is describing. And that's in the contemporary art world, you have people who are credited as sculptors and painters, and they do not paint or sculpt. In fact, they have an entire Jeff Koons, exactly. They have an entire factory of working class people with actual talent who are actually making all of their work for them while they sign their names to this. And to me, this is blasphemy. This is like if I photoshopped my head onto a ballerina's body and I said that I was dancing to Tchaikovsky. You can't say that you're a painter and then pay someone else to do your paintings. It's like using your money to steal credit for someone else's talent. And if I was proposing a better model for this, I would propose something like credits at the end of a movie. If someone wishes to do art as a collaborative endeavor, and there are many reasons, then the people who actually make the work with their own hands have to be credited and compensated.
100%.
You used to have visionary artists. Vision is the key word here. They would have the vision and they would have the ability. That's not necessarily going on these days anymore. What's really happening indeed, as has been mentioned, it's like, you just hire a bunch of craft hands and like, oh yeah, you go and make this stuff for me. It's my vision. But the problem is this guy who has the vision has never actually produced something himself. He doesn't really know the technicalities that go into creating this piece. So there is no vibration of the body of the artisan in the actual work. I mean, look, I'm someone who's unapologetically a sculptor in stone, and I've been called stupid things like, oh, you're too masculine, oh, you're too aggressive. The contemporary art world definitely has a very strict right and wrong. It's not about, as you would say, anything goes and we're open to everything. It's actually really not. You have very clear defined principles of what you would say is right and wrong, and that's the cultural hegemony that we.
And do you feel excluded from that definition?
Well, look, I'm actually very happy to be an outsider because I'm building my own thing with a collective of other artists on the outside, which is where true vitality stands.
Did you study in art school?
Yeah, I did.
So you're not an outsider, because that's a term to the people who do art.
Well, I'm not an outsider artist. I'm an outsider in the sense that I've made it very clear where I stand, and they've made very clear where I stand. So I'm like, okay, sure. And I've actually gained way more power being outside. I would say to all artists, try not to go on the inside.
By deciding you're going to be an outsider, you are in a place of privilege, because you decide, I don't want it to be engaged in social, political issues, because you have the privilege to decide that.
No, I make sculpture.
Sorry. Because you have the privilege, unlike some of us who are pushed in that position, of course.
The cultural hegemony again.
No, wait. Because we find ourselves to have to defend ourselves and our culture by engaging in social, political artwork to engage people. But if you are in a place of privilege to say, I want to be an outsider, I'm going to do my sculpture as I like, and I am actually happy with that.
But
That is
But at the
I just
same,
wanna-
Go
that
ahead,
is
please,
a
Samar.
place
Everyone's
of
coming.
privilege.
I don't know what this means. What does
But-
this
Well,
mean?
it does. It
agree.
does
I
mean a
just- I
lot.
wanna
I'm going to
add
have to
context.
deconstruct
No,
that.
it
I'm
does
gonna-
mean a lot.
Let me
I'm
just
gonna
distill.
add
Let me
context.
distill.
Because
I think
that's
what you're saying,
a that's
and
a
then come to you.
political
But-
that's a
but
political
from
decision.
what I
Yes,
understand,
no,
just to kind of
yeah.
distill, I think what
Yeah.
you're saying, for my sake more than anything, I think what he's trying to say is that you have the luxury of disassociating yourself from cause in the world, whereas he is only
course.
seen in these spaces as a
No,
result of his
I
cause.
was actually like I was on the periphery and then I was pushed out. You
No,
see,
no,
there is
no,
a
no,
right
no,
and
no,
wrong.
no, no.
So you eventually then say, okay, I've been pushed out.
No, you
I'm
just
doing my own thing.
you
So it hasn't
just
been a
said-
choice. It hasn't been a choice from you as opposed to
yeah,
you
you
actually
just
being
said
annexed.
I
I was
choose
within the
to-
institution. I was going through the sort of like on the periphery of the institutions. I was going through. I've had gallery shows. I've done all my stuff, and then at a certain point, when I made my ideas very clear of what I felt with a manifesto, media falls away. Support falls away, and you sort of go, well, you may as well embrace it. What I've found is I've actually been empowered by doing that, because then people begin to see the game is up. They begin to see, oh, actually, this place of freedom and diversity and all this stuff, it's a lie. It's a joke.
It's a lot.
But
Well,
where-
and-
where
well,
you're
let's-
coming-
how?
I'm going to give Samar the opportunity.
Sorry, I don't know how is it a lie when you are male, white, privilege versus
I don't play
us.
within that paradigm.
No, serious.
Let's
I
Samar-
really,
let-
I
let-
really,
let-
I really
let's
don't
talk
know
about,
how
like,
that is a
reality
lie.
One second,
versus-
Wafaa, one second.
When
Wafaa,
it
hold on
becomes
for
to
me, just-
diversity
Agree.
and
I
you're
don't play in that
accusing
game.
that is a lie.
One second, Wafaa.
In making work like that, I really don't
Thank
see
you.
that.
I
I
This
just
is
want
a
to
moral argument, and I'm tired of
that's
these
what
games.
that's what you say, because you're not somebody that has the embodied experience. So you're coming from a very radical stance, saying that vitality equal working this way outside of the institution, because the institution does not agree with my stance and is pro X, Y, and Z, and this is what I feel
I don't
is
agree
the
with their
right way.
stance.
Oh, you don't agree with that? This is how I feel is the right way to make art, which makes you very binary and very radical and very black and white.
Very
when art
postmodern
is completely
language.
that's not postmodern language. That
It
is
is.
basically
It's new left language.
that is completely not. That is actually the language.
The audience can read up about
No,
it.
because you're being very specific. Specific is not postmodern
You're-
language. It's
thi-
being very radical,
this-
very black and white.
This is cultural Marxism
But
at its absolute
How is it
root.
culture How is it culture
elaborate on
Marxism?
that. Like, I'm
Yeah,
curious
I would,
about
I
what
would
does that
love
mean?
to, because
Look, if you're going to
like
say
Hitler
that,
defines what is good art and what is not
One second,
good
one
art.
second,
So
let's
let's
just
if,
hear
hear
we're
it.
going to get into this idea of
Yep.
you're a white straight male,
Hmm.
and therefore because you're somehow in a privileged position, no one knows my background, no
But
one knows
that's
where
not
I've
my
come from,
question.
and it's this
Hold on,
and it's
hold
this massive thing that's just splashed onto you. What I'm saying, people are getting very fatigued by this. And what you will see is that moving
But
forward,
by
the
what?
arts and culture are moving away from this paradigm. This paradigm, like calling me of saying something like, "Oh, you're white and straight and you're male." I'm sorry, it's
No,
it's
no,
like
no,
that wasn't my
we're
question.
tired of this
My
game.
question is
No,
your
no,
stance
doesn't
on
Hold on,
art.
work.
Wafaa. What was
Doesn't
your
work.
question? Elaborate so
My
you can
question
answer
was
it
not
quickly.
that. Was the fact that you think vital work is one that exists utilizing craft and utilizing a specific way of doing things outside of political, social, cultural realm is the right way to do art. This is my actual challenge. It's not whether you're black, white, gray. It doesn't really
Well,
matter.
why did you bring it up?
I think what I'm trying to understand is that, to Fenn's point, is that how does his how does his whiteness reflect his artistic stance? He is about a very clear definition of what he believes art to be, but how does his whiteness a reflection of
Thank
that?
you so much. This is a really
Oh,
good.
It's
point.
not. It's not
Oh,
a reflection
okay.
of his art. I never said it was. I said that not acknowledging that there is a privilege to that separately from his art, but also acknowledging that his stance on the art is very sort of binary
Yes.
and very
So
specific.
your take is about the rigidity of his
Is
stance.
the rigidity and also the alienation of what that means to sort of others.
Right.
By sort of taking the stance, it means that also he thinks is superior. It's a stance in which positions you as better than others.
Would you say that's the
No,
case?
look,
Fenn?
I don't see how my stance on creating sculpture as Fenn de Villiers is somehow hurting other people. I think this is ludicrous.
Well, would you make a value judgment whether something is art or not based on your stance?
Well, yeah, because a sculptor has to. A sculptor has to. An artist has to. You have to make a value judgment.
Who said they have to, is my question.
Because if you've got a vision that you're adhering to as an artist, that you're following, that you have strong binds to, that you know that if you fill out this vision, you're staying true to yourself, then you follow that. I'm not. And I would suggest other artists do the same thing.
I'm sorry, but nobody object to what you're making, and I think you're imbuing yourself as a victim of the system.
Oh, no, I'm not.
No, I'm
Not at
sorry.
all.
I'm sorry, but the idea of going to the foundation is a very much like fundamentalism, because anything that moving forward is against the foundation, and that's what the world is in trouble for, because we are being pulled, we want it to be pulled backward because it's against the foundation, while we are light years ahead of everything. Things change, but if people cannot understand things that's moving forward, it's not the world problem. It is their problem because they cannot accommodate change. Perhaps cognitively, they cannot comprehend what is happening.
The thing is, creating art that people can't understand, and by this I mean ordinary people, not people with PhDs. I'm a dropout from school. That is part of why so many publics, including the American one, feel so disinvested in the art world. It's because they don't understand it. It doesn't speak to them. The people who are creating it appear to be talking over them. And I think the idea of forsaking ordinary people who haven't had access to these institutions is foolhardy. I also want to say that the institutions exclude probably the vast majority of people who make paintings and sculptures and prints and all of the other forms of artistic expression. But it's a class thing. It's a class division. And that those sort of class divisions and that looking down on people outside of the academy is endemic to the contemporary art world, certainly in America. And it's one of the reasons that people turn their back on it.
Okay, so final question after what's been an incredible debate. And for the audience's sake, I want you to tell me what's a piece of art that has struck you, and why should they go see it?
Michelangelo David.
Why?
It's so remarkably sculpted. You could see the veins on his arm. And apparently, it was left outside at some point. They built an entire institution on top of the sculpture to protect it.
Beautiful.
See, that's what art is. Force the institution to build on top of it.
Thank you, Wafaa. Thank you so much. Molly, I want to come to you next.
Basha's Garden of Earthly Delights, which is this hyper-detailed insanity and madness. It's like walking into the dark corners of someone's mind, except it's right in front of you.
Beautiful. Samar?
This is a very hard question, but I'm going to go as somebody who I admire their craft so much. They're more contemporary, and it's El Anatsu. And he's an African artist who uses discarded sort of tins and recomposes these incredible composition that weave so much like layers and culture and beauty, and they feel both hard, rigid, and soft at the same time, both like textile and sort of like sculptural, architectural. And to me, like everything that he does is always like so divine and amazing.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing. And my friend Fen.
It's very difficult to pin it down, but I would say a work that has inspired me since I can remember, it's The Unique Forms of Continuity in Space by Umberto Boccioni. It's an incredible work of a man stepping forward, striding through space and time. All of the lines, all of the compositional elements just play together like an incredible piece of music. And it's very vital, and people should check it out.
Beautiful. Friends, thank you so much has been an informative and passionate discussion. And selfishly, thank you for allowing me to learn through you. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks for having me
much.
on.
Amazing
Pleasure.
moderation.
Amazing.
Thank you.